Hey guys, it's Esquire Codex here, and today I'm playing more Rogue Legacy. If you saw by the title screen, I did beat it once, so I'm on Rogue Legacy Plus now. And in fact, since the time I recorded this video, I beat it again, so I'm on Rogue Legacy 2 Plus. Yeah, I'm getting up there, and so are the enemies. Gets hard. But today, I'm going to do a thing a little different. We are going to enter into the Dream Codex today. It's a new little thing I'm going to do. And this is what I was talking about in my last video, where I'm going to read a dream I had. We're going to see how this goes. I'm titling it the Dream Codex. And this is our first installment into the Great Codex of Dreams. So, my first story is entitled Through the Pines, and so as I said, this is a dream, so things might go funky, as dreams do, just crazy things happen, but we're just going to roll with it. This story is actually not too much outlandish things happen, but it's entitled Through the Pines. Here we go. It is the last day of our hiking excursion in the forest of northern Minnesota. We had packed up all our supplies into our backpacks and were trudging back to our cars. We also had our canoes to Porter as well, 2 persons to each canoe. It had rained incredibly through the night, and now half a foot of water was covering the ground wherever we walked. So it was a wet and sloshing business as we made our way through the countless towering pine trees that surrounded us on every side. A dismal affair not helped by the overcast skies. When we were perhaps a quarter mile from our cars, we reached the small creek we had crossed over earlier in the week as we had headed deep into the forest. However, it was no small creek now. Not after the rain. It was a flowing river 50 feet across, 5 feet deep, cutting a wide swath through the pines. With this obstacle in our way, we decided to set our canoes and packs down and take a quick break and contemplate what lay ahead. Our party consisted of my dad, 2 sisters, 3 family friends, and myself. However, we were not the only ones in this vast wilderness. It was the height of hunting season, and so every once in a while we would hear the pop of a gun off in the distance, or sometimes closer, like the very audible crack of a rifle that sounded somewhere 100 yards behind and to our left as we sat on our canoes next to this newly formed river. I wonder if that hit their mark, our friend remarked, and added jokingly, but I suppose we best be putting distance between us and those crazy hunters. You never know when they'll miss their mark. So we put our burdens back on our backs, shoved our canoes into the river, and hopped in. Our 3 friends packed into one canoe, my sisters and I into another, and my dad followed behind, alone. We crossed the river with little difficulty, but as my canoe reached the other side, I looked back to see where my father was. "Dad, where are you going?" I shouted after him, for he had turned up the river and was now paddling away with his back to us. But he didn't reply. "I'm going after him, guys," I said to the rest of the group. "Go on, leave without us. Dad and I will take the second car by ourselves." And with that I hopped into a canoe and took off paddling towards my dad. "Hey, come back here. I'm sure Dad will just meet us at the car," my sister called after me. But I was already 20 feet away and just continued on my course. So the remainder of the group on the bank picked up the last canoe and set off towards the car, and as I looked back a minute later, I could see the last of them disappear into the gathering dark under the pine trees. By this time, my dad had gotten about 100 feet ahead of me, and he showed little sign of letting up. Hey, Dad, wait up for me," I yelled up at him, but he didn't reply, or even show a sign of having heard at all. He just continued on paddling fiercely downstream. Well, that's sure weird, I thought to myself, so I set off with an equal determination of furious paddling. But I made up little ground on my dad. He continued on down the river with 100-foot lead. We continued on with this cat and mouse chase for another hour, the dusk gaining on us more and more overhead, and my dad never once glancing back or looking anywhere but straight ahead. Finally, my dad reached a bend in the river and slowed his canoe down to a stop. A minute later, I pulled around the bend as well and caught my breath as I beheld the beautiful panorama before us. We had come upon the mouth of the river as it dumped into a crystal clear lake. The clouds had cleared away, and the lake was rimmed all round by pine trees, right up to the bank, and the green-covered hills of the opposite side of the lake could dimly be seen in the setting sun. But it was this setting sun that was the true beauty in the scene. It painted the skies right above the hills, a deep purple, bright and red, then orange, then yellow, as you looked further and further up. It was the truest sunset I had ever seen, and hard evidence for why we had ventured deep into the wilderness to observe God's beauty. My dad, now just 10 feet in front of me, sat there in his canoe, with his paddle across his lap, staring off into the sunset. With exhausted arms, I pulled my canoe alongside the right of his, and I glanced over to him, about to blurt out my admiration of the picture before our eyes. But my words got no further than the bottom of my throat, cut short by his own look towards me. It was a look of content anguish. His eyes held a deep sadness, but a sadness full of peace. Then my gaze fell. It fell down to his chest, where his right hand rested, and the reason for this whole ridiculous rabbit chase through the forest became clear to me. His hand covered a growing red stain, but the blood was no longer being held back by his hand, but it was trickling down his arm and onto his lap. He had held back the inevitable for the last hour with a brute determination, a determination to see for one last time the physical beauty of his Creator on this earth, before he would finally meet him face to face in the hereafter. And as he turned his face back towards the far side of the lake, the sun slipped behind the distant hills. But he had fulfilled his goal. He had seen the beauty, and with that, his head slumped down towards his chest. Alright, so that was Through the Pines in our first installment of the Dream Codex. As I said, it didn't have any of that crazy dream stuff except the fact that, the forest was covered by water. Like, the whole forest had a foot of water, and that's just from one rain. I don't know how that happened, but hey, it's a dream. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope that was an interesting thing. I've got a couple more dreams written up, which we'll see if I pull those out at some time. I suppose while still living, still trucking along on my game here, which I'm a barbarian class. No, I'm a paladin class, which I've upped my stats so much that I've got so much health that my games lasted much longer than they did before. But I'm gonna talk a little about what I've been reading. I just picked up Fathers and Sons by Ivan Turgenev. I'm reading that in my book club with my sisters, and it's another Russian novel. Russian novels are excellent. I've talked about my love of Russian literature, and I haven't read any by Ivan Turgenev because I feel almost like a liar because I say I love Russian literature, but I've only read Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, which they may be the majors of it, but there's so much more that I could be reading in Russian literature. So now I'm glad I'm reading another one, Turgenev. So it's good so far. I'm only 50 pages in, so there's not much I can say. But there's one interesting thing. Well, I don't know if it's interesting. It's just astounding. This is translated by Constance Garnett, which she translates basically all of Dostoevsky's work, and she translated all of Tolstoy's, which I didn't realize she did more than that. I see here she's doing Turgenev as well. That woman was a translator and a half. My goodness, how many books did she translate in her life? So I find that quite incredible for how much translating she did. You see that Death Defy? I got like 2 of those in like 2 straight games. And apparently I have a 1.5% chance. So I don't know how that works out. Maybe Rogue Legacy isn't good at math. I mean, I am a math major. I could maybe help out in that department. They could hire me. I would probably do it for like $300. So if anyone knows Rogue Legacy, they can contact me and I'll get in touch with that. But until next time, this is Esquire out. See you guys.